Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reiki Rays Global Healing Summit. My name is Yolanda, and I'm here today with Frans Stiene. And we will be talking about practicing the system of Reiki, the secret to living in the flow. So, Frans, before we get started, I just want to thank you for taking time for the conversation today.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Really excited to be here and a great conference, of course. So many great speakers.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun and so informative. So before we get started, even though you've been here before, just want to give everyone a little bit of your background. So Franz is an author and co-founder of the International House of Reiki and Shibumi International Reiki Association with Bronwyn Logan. Franz loves to travel, teaching, and writing, and he has been teaching meditation internationally for over 20 years, meditation and Reiki. Franz is passionate about studying Japanese esoteric Buddhist teachings like Qigong, Tendai, and Shigundo, and then teaching them from a less strict viewpoint so that we can all benefit from these wonderful teachings. His main focus is helping people to remember their own true identity, because it is only through remembering this that we can start to create a world full of compassion and wisdom. He has been a major influence on global research into the system of Reiki since the early 2000s, and his practical understanding of the Japanese influences on the system has allowed students around the world to connect deeply with this practice. I can attest it's all very true. So, welcome, Franz.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. So, the secret to living in the flow, that is something I think we all could benefit from. And I think a lot of us are seeking, whether we really frame it that way or not. So, could you tell us, first of all, just how Reiki can help us achieve an effortless state of flow in our daily lives?
Yeah, I think, as you say it already, in our daily lives, and it's sometimes we find very difficult and we grab onto things and we hold onto things. So for me, for example, great when we look at hands-on healing, we already do hands-on healing with an open hand,
Yeah.
right? But then normally when we do hands-on healing on ourselves with an open hand or on someone else, then when we finish the treatment, then we go like this in a way. Yeah. Then we
Uh,
hold on very tight. And this tightness ultimately is a state of mind. So we can clearly see this within the precepts, that the precepts are a state of mind. And it's this state of mind of clinging, of hope, of all of these elements, attachments. And the more, therefore, that we cling and we like this, so our fists are like holding very, very tight, and also our energy can't flow. And therefore, also, we find it very difficult to be in the flow because we want certain things to happen. And if they don't happen, we get angry and then we get worried, etc.
yes.
So therefore, when we work with the system of Reiki, doing the meditation practices, as taught in Reiki 1, 2, and 3, hands-on healing on ourselves, working with the symbols and mantras in Reiki 2 and 3. Then also, of course, the Reiju, right? Attunement initiation, and then also working with the precepts. And when we
Right.
apply those practices, slowly, we start to soften up. And actually, in the word Reiki, we already see something about this flow, because when we look at the kanji of Rei, we see rain. Well, it doesn't rain ice cubes, right? And
Right.
if it rains ice cubes or hail, then it damages everything,
Right.
right? The crop get damaged, cars get damaged, houses get damaged, etc. But when we have this nice rain, then everything is actually being nurtured. So already we can see the difference between an ice cube or being in the flow, like a river. And the more we can actually practice to be like this river, then something very interesting happens. Then we can be more and more in the flow. If we are like an ice cube, we're constantly hitting things, right?
Right.
This doesn't go my way, that doesn't go my way, all of these things. And then we become very, very irritated with lots of elements in our life. And then again, we get angry or worried or fearful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Literally just said this about you yesterday. I forget what someone asked, but it goes with everything that you're saying. So when we look at the different elements within the system and how they help us to be more like the rain and not like the hail,
Yeah.
so to speak, um, I think for a lot of us as practitioners, we go into this only directing our minds to, I guess, the application of the practices during session,
Yeah.
but then act or allow ourselves to be in a different mindset just in our day to day. So I was
Yeah.
saying one of the things I learned from you was exactly everything that you shared, but recognizing it's not just for hands-on healing and it's not just for raise you, but how do we have um that state of mind and the
Yeah.
application of all of these tools just for the day to day.
Yeah. And I think, again, we can see this very clearly in the precepts today. Mikusui
Right,
doesn't say on a massage table or on a meditation pillow, but today in all we do. And
right.
I think the key element also is here by being in the flow is be grateful. We can see this in the precepts, be grateful. Most of the time we're not grateful, or we're only grateful for the
Mhm.
good things.
Right.
But in fact, then, yeah, what is good and what is bad is also very highly debatable. Yesterday was a storm. Actually, it's really good. Like all the rain cleans out everything. But other people might say, oh, this is really bad. I was on the bike. I just kind of moved through the rain and was fine. But this is also how we view it. But
Mhm.
if we can say, oh, I'm grateful what is happening. And so for me, actually, another deeper layer of being grateful is impermanence.
Right.
And normally we want to hold on to things. And then when it breaks, we actually not grateful. And then, of course, we do get angry. My favorite cup broke, my relationship, my car, my job, my whatever. But if we can be grateful, then also on a deeper layer. And so for me, there is lots of hidden teachings within the precepts. And in Japan, often you have a surface meaning and an inner meaning. And if in the surface meaning, we read the precepts and we say, oh, there is not being in the flow in the precepts, or there's not impermanence in the precepts, or those kind of elements.
Uh,
But if we look deeper within the precepts, then we can definitely see those.
yeah.
And when we realize that everything comes and goes, everything grows, everything dies, everything manifests, but also falls apart, then already it's much easier to be in the flow.
Right. And it makes me think of exactly what you just said, going back to the Gokai, the just for today, or the going deeper, the presence of mind. If
Yeah.
I'm grateful for what I'm enjoying in this moment, then I also have to be open to the next moment that will be,
Yeah.
which may look very different and just maintain. Yeah.
Instant change. Yeah, like we don't know. We can go left or we can go right, and
Right.
we make a decision, but things can change dramatically in a way, or you bump into a friend, or maybe you are hit by a car or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of these can happen.
So this brings up a good point because, it does tend to be that we do cling to, and we even sometimes get afraid of losing what we're enjoying or not wanting a moment to end and all of these
Yeah,
things. But another thing we all tend to struggle with, or most of us, is what will be, like uncertainty, not knowing what will be. It hasn't even happened yet, and we're already shifting. So,
yeah,
how can Reiki help us transform that ability to not get so caught up in what hasn't even happened yet?
yeah. I mean, this again is like, do not worry. Worry is often in the future what's going to happen in 1 minute time, or in 5 weeks time, or in 10 years time.
Yeah.
And so I see it a bit like this. If we have a frozen river and I throw this on it, this is like a little cushion for one of those nice little bowls. And I throw this on this frozen river, it stays there, right? And then if I leave it there the next day, it's actually really stuck to the ice.
Right.
And then if it stays frozen and maybe 2 days later, it's completely maybe encapsulated in ice and now it's really stuck. But if my mind and energy is like a beautiful flowing river, this is being thrown in, and the next moment it's gone.
Right.
So what they call often, there's no traces left. And normally we have
Mm.
all these traces, and these traces are an attachment. Even in hands-on healing, for example, we are often not in the flow because then we have a hope that my headache gets better.
Uh,
And as soon as there is a hope, that means already there's a fear that it doesn't get better,
yeah.
right? Or I hope my client feels something, or I hope I experience something what I can talk to my client about, or I hope my client is healed. Then all of this is based on fear. So actually, to also be really free of all of that, we need to let go of hope and fear.
Yeah.
And then slowly, slowly, we can be in that flow. But that is really being right here, right? And it's really, we can find it only in that moment, because as soon as we project it to the future, and again, this is why Mikusui, he didn't say, oh, tomorrow or in 2 years' time or yesterday. No, he said today. Today, be in that flow. That's enough. Let go of whatever comes in, goes out. Don't try to hold on to it, because the more we grasp it, but this can only really happen when we let go of our own narrow-mindedness,
Mhm.
right? Because when we narrow-minded, we're holding on and we're grasping. When we feel more this open-mindedness. So if we look also at the symbols and mantras, really, they're all talking about an open state of mind.
Right.
So for example, the third Reiki symbol and mantra, if you translate it, my original nature is right mind. So already it says, it doesn't say your confused nature. No, it says your original nature, what means when it was still flowing, like a little kid.
Yeah.
Like you can see these little kids, they just go with the flow. They're so fluid still. Oh, let's go left, let's go right. Well, no problem. It's all good. And then we grow older and we become more and more like this. And then very difficult to go with the flow. And so my original nature traditionally is flowing. And then when we grow up, it becomes more and more like ice, right? We
Yeah.
freeze it. A worry, a fear, worry for society, fear, you name it. And then also my original nature is right mind. And right mind in Japanese is also called no mind or mushin. And traditionally mushin is used in Zen, martial arts, flower arrangement, Shigendo, all of these teachings. So Mikasue actually points out mushin in his teachings. And what means a mind what doesn't get stuck anywhere.
Yeah.
So often we use this symbol and mantra for distance healing, but traditionally it's actually not for distance healing at all. It's actually realizing this open, expanded state of mind where we're all interconnected. And because it's so wide and open, everything flows. Things can come in this open space and things can go in this open space. And often it's a little bit seen as like a wave, right? A wave comes and goes all by itself. The wave doesn't stay, but the wave is still water. The wave is also not separate of the ocean. So the more we realize that even this glass falls and is my favorite glass, it's still part of the universe. It cannot disappear. Even if my dad died many years ago, he also didn't disappear. His physical body disappeared, but his essence is still here. This is right mind.
Mhm.
Everything flows. And then it becomes easier and easier to really live with the flow. Again, not easy, of course, and we get triggered all the time in our daily life.
Yeah.
But therefore, also, I think very important, like in Reiki 1, we have that beautiful practice called Joshin Kokiho, breathing in your hara or in your tanden, just below your belly button. And it's the center of your body. And I always, you know, my friend, we will wobble.
Yes.
So we will wobbles, but they don't fall. And this is the beauty of it. So we will wobble can be really in the flow, right? Weeble wobbles can be really flexible, but at the same time, really grounded and centered.
Right.
So something happens, but Weibo comes back up again. And now Weibo can be super in the flow. So I think another element, what is really taught also already in Reiki 1, not just the precept of being grateful, but also really doing these meditation practices of really focusing on your center, on your core, and then couple it with open hands-on healing. Where again, we don't do it like this. We do it with our open hands. Open hands, open mind. But we need to practice in the right way. You know,
Yeah.
if we practice hands-on healing and we are not focused, so we watch television or we chat or we distracted, then that open-mindedness might not really manifest. That only starts to manifest when we shut up, not necessarily verbally, but our mind, right? Not getting distracted by the past, the future, and even the present moment. Then we can be really in that flow.
It's so interesting. So many things come up with what you say. Every time I talk to you, I'm just like, wow, okay. You remind me a lot of what you speak of a lot, which is the firmness and the flexibility.
Yeah.
And I think we have a tendency to look for this or that, like either I'm firm
Yeah.
or I'm flexible. But you keep coming back to this this unification of the two. So while we're grounded and our minds can be very directed and anchored, simultaneously, our minds can be open and free. So I think that's a beautiful teaching that you're pointing out for us is it doesn't have to be one or the other, but really everything keeps pointing back to this like balanced state, as we say. And the Weeble Wobble is one of my favorites. It is a really good example because, Franz, a lot of us will hear these things and people will worry, like, worry, right? Does it seem like I don't care if I don't attach, if I don't flow? Does it seem like I'm disconnected and so I wonder how you view that, the idea of to be caring or to be compassionate somehow also links for us to we think we must then attach to
Yeah.
show that we care.
Yeah. I had years ago a student rang me up and he'd been practicing really a lot. And he said, Frans, I'm feeling more that firm and flexible in my life, right? So neither firm nor flexible. Also, this is very pointed out in the gasho, when we put our
Mm,
hands like this. Gasho is not one hand, gasho is two hands.
right,
Firm, flexible, left, right, here, there. So it's a unification of this. So we see the same in Joshin Kokyo. We're breathing in the hara and then also that expansion. So again, this grounded and expanded. So we
right.
can see this in the whole system of Reiki, this unification of the two opposite elements. So this guy calls me up and he said, Frans, my family is going through some drama and they're now upset with me because I'm not getting caught up in the melodrama and they think I'm not caring. And I said, okay, ask them this question. Can I help you better if I'm caught up in the melodrama or if I feel really grounded and stable? What do you think? And so a few days later, he rings me back up. He said, that was great. He said, so I asked him that. He said, actually, we feel that you're the support of the whole family now. He said, yeah. And if I've been caught up in the melodrama, then we all would sink,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So another friend of mine pointed this out in a wonderful way. Her partner was going through a bit of an issue. And so she saw it as quicksand. Said, he's in the quicksand. He want me to sit with him in the quicksand and all the sadness and all the problems and whatever. And I said to him, I'm not coming to sit with you in the quicksand. I'm going to stand here. I'm happy to throw you a rope,
Yeah.
but you have to pick it up. If you don't pick up the rope is useless. And so we need to have a very clear mind without getting caught up in the melodrama of life, actually have very clear action so that we can help other people. But I see this a lot too in a lot of modern healing practices, not even the system of Reiki, where practitioners or healers between brackets, because I don't think we heal anybody, it's
Yeah.
just we facilitators. But where they get caught up and then they say, oh, I can't do this anymore, or I get caught up in my client, or I get caught up in my own suffering. And then suddenly they say, oh, I need to stop doing this practice because it's too overwhelming. It's too much. Well, it means we're not grounded and centered in our own body, like we will wobble.
Right. Yeah.
So therefore, again, is Mikosui put these really specific meditation practices in the system of Reiki to be super in the flow. And if we look at the Reiki 3 symbol and mantra and we translate it, it means great bright light. And I have some bright light on here and it's super sunny. I've got these big windows here. There's a lot of light coming in. I've got put a curtain, but it's even shining through the curtain. So there's lots of light. I can't grasp the light. The light is in the flow. So the more we make a whole mind body energy like light, actually from conception, it's already like light, but then we more and more actually get caught up in the melodrama of life. But when we remember this inner light again, this inner luminosity, then again, it's easy to go with the flow.
Yeah.
No melodrama. And it doesn't mean we do not get anger. It doesn't also mean we do not get worried. But like we will wobble, instead of laying down for 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years, we stay angry or upset or worried with people, with friends, with society. Actually, the next moment we can come back up again.
Yeah.
So something happens, and the next moment back to our center.
It's really interesting hearing you say this because it makes me think of how at the very foundation, if we make the choice, right? If I say I'm
Yeah,
willing to at least try to let go of my attachments, my this, then everything within the system is training you to do so. So it's not even something like you have to force or again, bring our minds to how do I get this right? Like what Franz is talking about. If we apply the practices, it's naturally training ourselves to um experience those states
yeah,
that you're talking about, which is why I think our practice is so important, of course. But you also remind me of when you were talking about before, like the waves and the in and out and not attaching to any of it. It made me think of the breath and how,
absolutely. Yeah.
inhale, exhale, and we don't walk around trying to like eat air. We're not trying to like just
Absolutely. Yeah.
go try to like get air and hold on to it so tightly. And in fact, I mean, that would be terrible for us if we didn't let it go. Yeah. So, yeah, I thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it brings us to the improvement of our emotional flexibility because, we've been talking a lot about mind and these attachments. And even on an emotional level, there's obviously so much that we experience. And again, different reasons of why we may want to hold on to a feeling and show you how I feel or,
Yeah.
what are all of these different things. So I'm sure it's in the same vein, but how do we then, again, recognize where Reiki is showing us that we can be even in an emotional flow?
Yeah. I think it's really tricky. It's really difficult. And when we talk about it, it sounds all great. And we show we will wobble. It's also easy. But
Yeah,
most important, therefore, is to feel it. As you say, yeah? Like we don't have to think about breathing in and out. It just happens all by itself. So
right.
the more we practice, then automatically we start to feel, oh, I feel less attachment to things. And it doesn't mean that we feel less love. Actually, maybe we feel more love
Mhm.
because I think often we mistake love for attachment, right? Then
Yes.
we attach to, actually, I just met up with a friend yesterday and he bought a new car. I know this guy since I was 16. He bought a super expensive new car. His business, he owns a business. It's going really well in the last few years. So he buys a super, man, he was like, and you could see it, like he is so grasping this car. And there was some bird poo in it, and he was freaking out. And like we get so attached to these things. And then I remember some years ago, he had also bought another car. Now he's a new car. So, and we went to the beach. I live close by to the beach, and it was a summer day. And he said, let's go for dinner at the beach. And it was super busy. And he had bought a big car, one of these in Dutch, like more an American big car.
Yes.
And the parking spaces were all small. Oh man, he was sweating. He couldn't, like, I said to him, I said, I could have parked my bike easier than your very expensive car, right?
Yeah.
And so when I reflected on it, in a way, I mean, he's so proud of his car, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But he was so scared to get a little scratch, so scared that something would happen. So in a way, he bought worry. Do you
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, and now we spend so much money on worry, actually an object where we have such an attachment to it. And if something happened, we're freaking out. Then
Mhm.
we get angry with whatever. Then we get worried. But it will fall apart one day anyway,
Right.
right? I mean, like
Yeah.
we cannot stop it.
Mhm.
We a little bit of hail and there's a dent in the roof, like again, we cannot stop these outer circumstances. So we can actually learn how not to grasp all of this. And therefore, for me, I think is also really that be grateful that at least we have a car or that we have a bike
Yeah.
or that we take an in and out breath in the morning that we wake up. And the rest is a bonus. So don't hold on to it.
Right. Well, it's interesting you say too, because I'm like, then how do you enjoy the car or enjoy the whatever it may be if you're so nervous the whole
Yeah,
time?
well, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
do this with husbands, with wives, with a house, with many different objects we have. And
Right.
then actually we become so cluttered in that we cannot in the flow anymore. So
Yeah.
also in some of these very traditional teachings, you actually do meditations where you visually in your mind give everything away. So you start to give away your objects and then you give away your partner, then you give away your house. And this actually helps you to soften this. And the most thing, of course, what you have to give away is I, me, mine. This is my glass. This is my house. This is my car. This is my partner. This is my whatever, right? And therefore also when we look at the rain or the sea, we're not going to hop into the sea and say, this is my sea, right?
Right.
Because as soon as we say, this is my sea, then we get upset when someone else steps into the sea or whatever, we get caught up. So the natural elements are a great tool to really reflect upon that within ourselves. This is not I, me, mine. It's just things what come into our possession temporarily and then they go.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. You remind me of how you speak a lot about interconnectedness.
Hmm.
And in everything that you're sharing, it reminds me of how we talk about Reiki in a lot of ways as of being great for stress relief, stress reduction, these kinds of things. And obviously, everything you're talking about would point to helping us to alleviate that.
Yeah.
But it also brings up that mind body connection and how none of it is separate. And a lot of times when we are in the state of worry or stress, people think there's no way I can not be stressed until
Yeah.
there's resolution, or I have to stay tight
Yeah.
until there's a solution or this thing is fixed, right?
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about that interconnectedness that Reiki highlights between like the way that we're perceiving and the breath and the body and all the things and how it correlates with what you're sharing?
Yeah, I mean, in the precepts again, we see a wonderful sentence called Shin Shin Kaizen, mind body harmony. And my body is always here, right? Right in the now. My body is not in the future, also not in the past. My breath, and this is also when we think about the breath, is such a great example. My breath is also not in the past or in the future, but
Yeah.
my mind, oh shit, my
Yeah.
mind is always in the past or in the future, right? So therefore, within the precepts, we can really clearly see, because Sui says, have that mind in your body. You anchor it in your body. And when we focus on the body, this is also when we focus on hands-on healing. then my mind is right here. But if I do hands-on healing and I just say, oh, it doesn't matter what your mind does, then my hand's in here, but my mind is somewhere else. I'm thinking about Starbucks later on and having a like chai latte and a little, excuse me, brownie. Then where's my energy is also really scattered.
Yeah. Yeah.
So therefore, really the instructions are, this is also with Joshin Kokyo, we bring the mind and the breath into the body. We can see this also in yoga, tai chi, qigong. You first focus on the body. Why? Because the body is right here, right in the present moment. Why do you focus so much in all of these meditation practices on the breath? Because the breath is right here in the moment. And therefore, also, we can be very grateful because the gratefulness happens only when we're in the moment,
That makes
right?
all the sense. Yes. And I have to ask you this because I'm sure people are wondering. Let's say you and I are out to lunch and I'm just yip yapping, who knows, whatever I'm talking about, but you maybe want to think about the beach or think about other things, right? Is that what you do in the moment? Like, do you consciously bring your mind like into your body, into your being, even with exchanges? Or do you notice that um, it's a little more challenging to even just enjoy daily interactions if you don't bring yourself back to the breath? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know this already. We can see this in relationships or when we meet people,
Right.
or particularly very tricky these days with these
Yes.
things. The other day, I went for lunch and it was like two women sitting next to me, and they were just like these, hardly talking to each other. And I go like, what? What is the point of it?
Right.
Right? There is no interaction, no depth, no like this, right?
Yeah.
And the phone also takes us into often, oh, I wish I had this. I wish
Mm,
I could do that. Oh, and then we get angry what we see, blah, blah, blah. So for me, it's like in the beginning, we train ourselves to be really in the present moment. And in Japan, there's a wonderful phrase. Sometimes we are so distracted that we don't notice we are so distracted. And then, of course, if I'm having lunch with you and I'm so distracted, then you go after a while like, shit, well, Frans is boring because he's not even listening. He's not even paying attention. There is no interconnectedness. Of course, there's an interconnectedness, but I polluted with my own confusion.
right.
And so here's a great example my teacher once did for me. And for me, I find it very beneficial. And he said, if we distract it a lot like this, then we often don't see it, right? But if we start to do a deep breath and we calm ourselves down and then we get distracted, then it stands out like really,
Right.
really clear. So the more we take a deep breath, the more we calm the mind through these breathing practices, hands-on healing, working with the symbols and mantras, etc., then we can see, oh, I'm actually getting distracted. So for example, when we chant the precepts, and in the beginning, that might be a little bit difficult because it's in Japanese and maybe we don't speak Japanese, but actually that helps us to stay focused. And then if I'm getting distracted, we make a mistake.
Mhm.
So I'm chanting the precepts and then, oh, I start to think about something. Bring my back to chanting the precepts. Let me refocus. And the more I do that, then the more I can stay focused in my daily life. And then due to the focus, I realize this wide open spaciousness. And so now it's easy to stay in the flow.
Yeah. It's so interesting because it all always comes back to the same, right? I mean, with everything
Mm.
you share, like, for example, when we listen to you and we can hear, okay, he's saying, chanting the Gokai and hands-on healing and, Joshin Kokiho, these things. But again, they're all pointing to the same thing. And if we start to, I think, acknowledge a lot of what you're sharing with us today, that if I am in the moment with my breath, not only am I present, but my mind is also expanded. If I lay my hands, I'm directing my mind, but I'm also allowing clarity and spaciousness of mind, right? This
Yeah.
again, this harmonizing of the opposites that you say, it's just all very interesting how it all keeps coming back. And I think a lot of what you share as well, I could say I literally just said this to someone yesterday too. Through your teachings, I found every level is pointing to the same thing. Like every
Yeah.
level of Reiki, like it's just different ways of trying to
Yeah.
get you to do the same thing. And so I wanted to ask you about this part because you are such a playful kind of energy. And you have just this openness that can be felt. It's like it's palpable, right? But then clearly you're also very diligent and focused, kind of you're present in all of these things at the same time. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Like even the role that this openness, your relationship to life, how that plays into what Reiki is showing us and teaching us.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, when we look at water, what is not frozen,
Mhm.
then the water is playful. It can move in any kind of direction. I can pour it in here and it fits in here. I can put it in here and it fits in here. I can put it in all sorts of different shapes. But frozen water, impossible.
Right.
So any kind of situation in our daily life is a different shape, for example. And if I'm like that frozen water, then I get quickly upset because now I don't fit in this situation and I
Hmm.
don't fit in that situation. Or I don't, for example, I had to go to my accountant yesterday and it's about a 45-minute bike ride. I don't have a car, so I ride the bike. And I arrived there and they're looking, what are you doing here in the office? I said, I come for my appointment. Oh, she's sick. Didn't she say so? I said, no, oh no, she didn't. And they all expected me to be angry or
Mm.
upset because I came for 45 minutes on the bike, 45-minute back. And so I was joking and having a little laugh. And they go like, oh, you're okay with us? Yeah, geez, I did a bit of fitness and I can go for a coffee. And so this morning she was better. So again, I arrived and they were actually discussing in the office, oh, you're back again. Yeah, I'm back again. He said, oh, we can really take an example of you
Yeah.
because most, and also said most clients will then be upset. And the more we try to fit in, oh, but this was my appointment, and now it like this ice cube, and suddenly it changes circumstances. Now the ice cube doesn't fit in the circumstances anymore. So now we get upset. So, but if we more like water, very easy to navigate, very easy to go with the flow. So there's one thing what we need for this ice cube to melt, and that is heat. The heat of love, heat of compassion, heat of openness, heat of expandedness, heat of the breath, right? Often when we do hands-on healing, maybe we feel some warmth. But what if we feel this warmth through our whole body, our whole being? This is when I lived in the Himalayas for a year. These yogis and yoginis, they wear hardly anything because they have such an inner heat. We can see
Wow.
this inner heat pointed out in Japanese spiritual teachings, in the Himalayas, in shamanic teachings. Why? So this frozenness is being melted, and we can now fit in any situation without worry, without anger, and then we can be grateful for that experience.
Wow. The beauty of, I think, what you're sharing, and even just as you are, I think, as a human and a teacher, is it also highlights how our practice isn't just about, when we're meditating in the corner or just when we're in session or whatever it is that we may make time for a dedicated practice. While that part is important, we're constantly able to practice just in the day to day. And it doesn't have to be so rigid, like you just keep telling us, we don't have to be ice cubes
No.
in our practice. We can be very flowing and very open and enjoy life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
Now,
nice flow.
here is an interesting. So I have a teacher in Japan, Takeda Ajari, and he lives in a small little village town. And so I was there again. I've been training with him since 2012. I was there last year. And so at one point, he gives me a broom. I go and sweep outside. the tempo is a little strict. And I know he's not saying that, but I know he's kind of observing through the window what I'm doing. And because it's the kids are going to school, so it's early morning, little kids is little school down the road. And then he's looking on how I interact with the moms and dads who bring the kids to school. If I interact with the kids, it's a small village. They look at you like, whoa, who's this big, tall foreigner here? And they look at you like, whoa, and then they start to speak in Japanese. You have no clue. I can be an ice cube and pretend, like I need to sweep the floor. This is
Right.
not so good. Right. Or they ask you a question and, you play with the kid, you joke. Then we can also see, are we in the flow or not in the flow?
Mhm.
So there's great opportunities every moment of the day. Like we missed the bus. Are we in the flow or not in the flow? Are we like an ice cube, get worried, get angry? Or do we say, well, maybe this gives us a great opportunity. I'm being grateful because it gives me a great opportunity to relax and maybe talk to the other guy who is waiting for the bus. And now we have a nice conversation and something magical might happen. We don't know. So these kind of elements, I think, is wonderful opportunities for us to learn and grow. Again, Mikosui says today means today in everything we do, not just on the massage table. If we think the system of Reiki is hands-on healing, we're utterly mistaken, right? It's about a daily life and the mindset. This is also why in the precepts, we don't see anything about hands-on healing. It's the mindset, and the mindset is a trigger for hands-on healing.
Right. You're making me think of you as an ice cube, really just all of us, right? So like if we because we have our ice cube moments and
Yes.
I imagine, practicing and being very diligent, like you may still have those moments, but instead of it taking over your entire being, it's just
Yeah.
like a smaller piece of ice. And
Yeah.
then, maybe just easier to, observe, sit with, and allow it to melt, so to speak. So for those of us that may have a challenge where we're like ice cubing often, do you have something that you think is a nice go-to for in the moment of when we are in that stuckness, in that rigidity,
Yeah.
instead of going into blaming or beating ourselves up? What can we do like in that moment?
Yeah, I think you used the word blaming. Let me focus on it. There's a great Taoist saying, and if you blame someone else, you're off the path. If you blame yourself, you're halfway on the path. If you blame no one, you're on the path.
Mm,
And I love this, right?
yes.
Because we often blame, we blame the bus driver, we blame my mum today. I had to take her to the she needed a new identity card and her fingers are like this. So they're having trouble with like we spent half an hour trying to get her fingerprints. And even now they just called back and they said, they're not good. You have to come back.
Oh,
And like for an older person that is difficult, but okay, mom, just relax, stay in the flow. She can't this woman can't do anything about it. The machine can't do anything about it. So there's
yeah.
no need to worry about it. It just is the way it is. Right?
Yeah.
Just be grateful that we're here, that we can breathe, that we can be here, that we can do this like this. So I think always bring it back to gratefulness, but also bring it back to that centeredness, right? So being in your body, anchoring your mind in your body so you don't get caught up in that melodrama. You don't freeze over constantly.
Right.
And then if that becomes your habitual pattern, then it becomes easier and easier and easier. So, for example, I always also say if I plant an apple seed, I get apples. If I plant banana seed, I get bananas. So if I keep planting worry and anger, then automatically very difficult to go into the flow because I've not been planting the flow. I've been planting being an ice cube all the time. So don't expect being in the flow tomorrow or next week or in 5 years' time. So therefore, small moments being in the flow is already practicing.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that because just I think even unconsciously a lot of times we have the expectation of, okay, I heard with what Franz said, and now I should be able to apply. And
Yeah.
tomorrow I'm not going to be an ice cube, but to your point, it's all a practice. And all of these things within the system, again, they're so much bigger than just the session. So, how
Yeah.
can we create a simple, effective Reiki practice at home to help us maintain this flow?
Yeah. So again, first, really, connecting to your body, yeah, being in your body, grounded, centered. Do some chanting, for example. Also, when we chant the precepts, for example, in Japanese, that chanting has a certain vibration. And if we do it correctly with the deep breathing, that actually triggers an inner heat. Yorake ai karuna shimpai suna kansha shite yo ake me ito ni senzetsu ni. Then already we feel this vibration, like in maybe every cell. And that already is a certain friction. Friction triggers heat, melts this frozenness. So, for example, maybe we like a frozen river, right? We completely like a frozen river. And if we melt that, then we're still frozen, but there's bits of water in between. So it's easier to flow already. And so we notice, oh, I can go a little bit more with the flow, not completely yet, but we keep practicing. Also in the precept, we keep practicing diligently, slowly, slowly, slowly. And then one day we think, oh, what I used to be like this. Now I'm a little bit like this. Now I'm like
Hmm.
this. Or sometimes I explain it with Weeble Wobble that, oh, if I was triggered, I used to lay like this for 3 months. And now I've been practicing, and now I lay for 2 months, and then I get back up. And now I practice more, and now I'm up again after 1 month. And then we practice more, and then suddenly, oh, the trigger is happening, and the next moment I'm back up again. And so now we slowly, slowly can see this change within ourselves. It become very evident. And the more that we practice, then like a weeble wobble, easier to find your center. Why? Because you've been focusing on your center. Why? Because you've been focusing on being in the flow more and more and more. Why? We've been focusing on the heat of compassion and kindness.
You know what I love so much about what you said, Franz, is especially with the chanting part, um, a lot of people, one, may have challenge with learning it in Japanese, but then even once you do, to your point, even though we may know um the Gokai and whatever our native language may be, we don't necessarily all know the exact translation while we're saying it in Japanese. And yet it still has an effect. So we
Absolutely.
don't have to fully understand, so to speak, to experience the effect of, like you say, the vibration and then how it may generate heat for us and just the feeling and the direction of mind, all of these layers. And the reason I say it reminds me of, again, how we can get caught up in wanting to be right
Yeah.
or perfecting certain things or needing to know every single thing. And again, like you say, it's like a way of like buying our worry that we're
Yeah.
already creating all of this noise instead of just being in the flow of whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
okay if you don't fully understand, but if you're focused, what are you experiencing? And it seems like that principle that you're sharing could be applied
Yeah.
to everything.
Absolutely. Not so long ago, these persons go, yeah, but I don't really know how it works, these practices, and I need to know, blah, blah, blah. And he had his phone out. I said, can I ring you? What's your phone number? So I ring, phone, he picks up, like, why are you doing this? You're sitting opposite me. I said, do you know how your phone works? And he goes, not really. I said, yeah, but you trust it. You just picked it up. You play with it, you do all sorts of things. You have no fucking idea how it works, and
Right.
yet you do it.
Yeah.
But when we go to Reiki or other spiritual practices, we need to know, I need to know exactly how it works. I live on the 11th floor. I don't know really how the elevator works, but I
Yeah.
take it daily and I trust that it works, right?
Yes.
So is all of these things. It's just we get too caught up in our head instead of just practice.
Yeah.
There was a wonderful little video, and there was a Shugendo teacher in Japan, and he had two foreigners coming to train with him, and he said to them, okay, from midnight to 6 in the morning, you're going to chant, I don't know, 10,000 mantras, right? Like this. And so here's the mantra. Off you go. I come and check in a little bit to see how you're doing. So the monk comes, or the priest comes in and says, "How are you doing?" And so the woman goes like, "Oh, this is too difficult. I can't do it, even if it's still 6. I need to stop." "Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. You take your own time." So she stopped. He goes to the guy. He said, "How are you going?" And he's having a pen and a piece of paper. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, if I chant so many in 10 minutes, then I chant so much in an hour, then I cannot chant 10,000 in like by 6 a.m. in the morning." And so the priest goes, "Did I ask you to do calculations or did I ask you to chant?" And he goes like, "You asked me to chant.
Mm.
Why are you doing calculations?"
Right.
But this
Right.
is it, right? We get so caught up with all sorts of other shit.
Yeah.
And because we're not focused, and therefore we often don't follow the instructions correctly.
Yeah. And so you remind me of something else too with in relationship to you is a lot of people ask me why when you come to the United States, I'll keep resitting
Mm,
Shimpenden. I'm like, because I don't know what I'm gonna learn. And they're like, well, you've taken the class before. Yeah, but I don't know what I'm gonna learn. And even more, I don't know what I'm going to experience. And so
absolutely.
I never even thought about this before, but I think even that applies to our daily life of, say you got to get up for work. And we often have the expectation of, oh, today's going to be like yesterday. And now you're
Yeah.
creating some weird flow instead of
Yeah.
being in the possibility of like, you know, hey, today could be a great day. Who knows?
Yeah.
Whatever. Right. And so it's really interesting that I think we create a lot of flow that we probably don't want to be in instead of just allowing again everything that you shared with us today. It's just coming to mind. What if we started our day in these practices? What if we started with like the presence and the openness? How much different would that be than
Oh, I think
creating?
we would have a more compassionate world, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems so simple listening to you say,
Yeah. We
yeah,
just make it super complicated.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a very beautiful thing. And I just want to say too, I think it's very encouraging seeing a teacher like you who not only have you been practicing and teaching for so many years, but exactly that, like you still practice. It's not like you got to a point and you're like, I got this. I don't have to do anything anymore. You're a
Yeah.
really good example of how we can keep refining and keep creating a beautiful flow for ourselves if we show up.
Yeah. And I think this is so important that my teacher still has teachers, right? So my
Yes,
teacher is 70, he still has teachers. So it never stops.
right.
So if we say as a teacher that's done and I don't need anybody else, then mm, not so good, right?
Yeah,
And I think also is so important that we hold hands and show each other how it can be done, how we can practice, how we support each other to be in this flow in our daily life. And I
right.
think this is essential. And also my teacher said, Frans, go out in daily life and explore it. And this actually is very much, we see this in Mikusui. So traditionally, it's like you go into the mountains, like Mikusui, to melt your ice, so to
Yeah,
speak. Then you go down from the mountain into daily life to show what is possible, not just for hands-on healing, to
right.
be a living example.
Yeah,
What a living example of kindness, of openness, of being in the flow. Again, not always easy because we still do get like this, right? So we need to therefore keep practicing. No matter if we've been for 2 years in the mountains or 6 years, we still need to keep practicing.
Yeah. And I do want to point out as well, I mean, for everyone listening, the links are below for your website and all of the ways to connect with Franz and his work. But you do provide a lot of content for us practitioners to sharpen our practice and to stay. You give a lot of opportunity for us to have various ways to stay diligent in our practices. But I also want to say this too. Interestingly, just yesterday, somebody said that it wasn't me though this time. It was someone else saying this about you. They were recommending you have authored several books, and one of the more recent books, the Inner Heart of Reiki, they were talking about how you have a class that accompanies the book. So it's
Yeah.
not just reading about different aspects within the system of Reiki, but you have this kind of guided walkthrough to help us all know how to apply these things. So I just wanted to point that out because, if anyone is listening and wondering, well, how do I do all of these
Yeah.
things that you're talking about, Franz? You have so many options that help us learn different techniques.
Yeah, I think it's so important. Some people learn through reading, some people learn through listening.
Right.
Most of course, is we need to do the practice, right?
Yeah.
We can read many cookbooks and we can look at many videos of food, but if we don't eat it and cook it, then not so good. But The Way of Reiki, my latest book, what came out is that's also beautiful. I think it's a 9 hour video or
The
something.
way of Reiki. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, really excited. I like doing this also. And I think it's important that we also as teachers stimulate ourselves to develop and to work with this. Not just for me actually, I really do it first for myself. Like I
Yeah.
have a quote of the day that is really I do it for myself. And then I go, oh, actually, I can also put it as the quote for today, but it really helps me. So for me, I find them very personal for my own life to say, oh, this is what I can do with it.
Yeah. I have to say, the reason I always say Inner Heart of Reiki is because that's how I met you was through that book. But
Yeah,
The Way of Reiki is, yeah, the book with the accompanying class or guidance. So I do want to ask you though, what is the best way for people to connect with you, work with you? Is it through the website, signing up for the newsletter, these kinds of
that's
things?
it. Yeah, through the website, signing on to the newsletter or Instagram or Facebook or those kind of elements, social media. But yeah, website is great. Yeah, all our
Okay.
blogs and classes are on it. And
Yes. Well, I do want to thank you so much, Franz, for always sharing and inspiring us, but for taking the time to have this conversation. Hopefully, you have inspired many to be in their flow in new ways. So, thank
thank
you
you.
so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for the interview. Absolutely wonderful and good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And to all of you, thank you so much for joining us.